On October 12, 1972, a chartered plane on its way to Chile departed Uruguay in South America. The aircraft carried 45 people, including rugby players and their families who had joined the journey. This should have been a routine 3-hour flight to Santiago. However, the route required crossing the massive Andes mountain range, which stretches as the world's longest mountain chain. These magnificent mountains would soon become the setting for an incredible survival story. Storm conditions over the mountains that day forced the pilots to make an unplanned stop at Mendoza, Argentina, where passengers spent the night before continuing their journey. The next morning, October 13th, the plane took off again at 2:18 p.m. under clear skies. For the first hour, the flight proceeded smoothly without incident. At 3:21 p.m., the pilots began their descent towards Santiago. Though the plane was approaching its destination, it remained surrounded by towering peaks that rise near the city. Suddenly, severe turbulence struck the aircraft. The plane began shaking violently as thick clouds enveloped it completely. Warning alarms sounded throughout the cabin as lights flashed urgently. The rugby players aboard remained calm, treating the situation as just another bump in the journey. They continued joking among themselves, not realizing the danger they faced. The one passenger glanced out his window as the clouds began to clear. What he saw filled him with terror. The aircraft was flying dangerously close to a mountain face. Once the pilots emerged from the cloud cover, they immediately spotted the massive rock formation directly ahead. In desperation, they pulled back on the controls, trying to gain altitude quickly. The ground proximity alarm blared as the pilots applied full power, attempting to climb over the mountain safely. Their efforts came too late. The aircraft's tail section struck the mountain during the climb attempt. The entire rear portion of the plane broke away, taking 2 rows of seats with it. 3 passengers disappeared into the void, still strapped to their seats. The damaged aircraft continued climbing for several more seconds before beginning its fatal descent. Another impact tore away the left wing, sending more passengers to fall into the void. Only the front section remained intact as it plummeted toward a glacier below. The wreckage slid down the icy slope at 350 kilometers per hour before coming to rest 700 meters lower on the mountainside. The crash destroyed everything inside the aircraft. Passenger seats ripped away from their mountings, while the cockpit crumpled completely, killing both pilots instantly. The broken aircraft now lay scattered across an unknown peak in the Andes at an altitude of 3,570 meters above sea level. Miraculously, 33 of the 45 people aboard had survived the devastating crash. Many suffered serious injuries, and none knew their exact location. Later, investigations revealed the plane had drifted 80 kilometers off its intended flight path. This marked the beginning of an extraordinary survival challenge that would test human endurance beyond imagination. 2 survivors emerged relatively unharmed: 19-year-old Roberto Canessa and 20-year-old Gustavo Zerbino. Both were medical students who immediately began assessing the other survivors and treating the wounded. Many passengers had sustained severe injuries in the crash. Among them was 23-year-old Fernando Parado, who lay unconscious with a fractured skull. The 2 medical students worked tirelessly to help their fellow survivors in any way possible. Soon after the aircraft vanished, Chilean rescue teams got word about the missing plane. Within 1 hour, they sent out 4 search planes to look for any survivors. The rescue crews searched from evening until dark, but could not spot the wreckage anywhere. Radio messages told rescue workers that the plane had likely gone down in a hard-to-reach mountain area. The biggest challenge was that the aircraft had a white body, making it nearly impossible to see against the snowy white landscape of the mountains. When night fell on October 13th, the 33 people who survived the crash felt hopeful. They believed rescue teams would find them after one cold night in the mountains. Sadly, 5 badly hurt passengers died during that freezing night, leaving only 28 survivors. The remaining people used the broken plane as their shelter. They packed luggage, airplane seats, and snow into the back opening of the aircraft to keep the cold wind out. The next morning, October 14th, 11 aircraft joined the search. Teams came from Argentina, Chile, and Uruguay to help find the survivors. The search teams picked the right area to look in, and the crash site was actually within their search zone. But they still could not see the wreckage. The survivors tried different ways to get attention. They used red lipstick to write SOS on top of the plane, but they ran out of lipstick before finishing the letters. Next, they arranged suitcases in the snow to make a large cross that pilots might notice. 3 different planes flew directly over the crash site that day. The survivors shouted, waved their arms, and did everything possible to get the pilots' attention. Nothing worked. By October 15th, the survivors knew they needed water to live. A passenger named Fido Strouch came up with a smart solution. He used a piece of metal like a mirror to focus sunlight on snow, melting it into water drops that he caught in empty wine bottles. The group also got creative with airplane parts. They wore seat cushions like snow boots and pulled wool stuffing out of seat covers to stay warmer. 3 days after the crash, on October 16th, Fernando Parado woke up from being unconscious. He learned his mother had died in the crash and saw that his 19-year-old sister was badly hurt. Parado did everything he could to help his sister, bringing her food and water each day. 8 days later, she also died. This tragedy shows us how quickly life can change. We never know what will happen tomorrow, so we should value each day we have. Most of these passengers came from areas near the ocean where snow never falls. Now they face temperatures of minus 30 degrees Celsius high up in the mountains with little food or water. The survivors also had to deal with snow blindness. When bright sunlight bounces off snow and ice, the light can hurt your eyes badly. This condition made their situation even more dangerous. The group had only 3 pairs of sunglasses to share among everyone, 8 days after the crash. On October 21st, rescue teams made a heartbreaking decision. They stopped looking for survivors because they had found no signs of life after searching for so long.
Feeling that the world is alive and they consider you dead.
The rescue workers believed nobody could still be alive after that many days in the mountains. After 142 hours of searching, officials ended the rescue operation completely. While this was happening, the survivors discovered a small radio hidden in the airplane seats. Ron Harley, one of the rugby players who knew about electronics, worked to get it running. He built a long antenna and managed to turn on the radio. The radio only worked one way. The survivors could listen to broadcasts but could not send messages back to anyone. 11 days after the crash, they turned on the radio and heard terrible news. The search for them had been called off. The survivors felt crushed. Some people cried when they heard this. Others put their hands together and prayed to God. The world thought they were all dead, but they were still fighting to live. Fernando Parado stayed calm when he heard this news. He was already thinking about a different plan. By day 11, food was almost gone. The survivors had started with very little. They only had 8 chocolate bars, 1 can of mussels, 3 small jars of jam, 1 jar of almonds, a box of peanuts, some dates, candy, dried plums, and a few wine bottles. Soon after the crash, they began saving food carefully. Each person ate tiny amounts every day. Parado made 1 chocolate-covered peanut last for 3 whole days. At 3,800 meters high in the mountains, no trees, plants, or animals lived that they could eat. By the 11th day, all their food was gone. Some people tried eating parts of the airplane. They chewed on cotton stuffing and leather seats, but this made them sick. With no other choice but death, the survivors made a shocking decision that would help them stay alive. They decided to eat the bodies of people who had died in the crash. This choice was extremely hard to make. Most of the dead passengers were their friends, classmates, family members, or teammates. Canessa suggested this idea first and was the first person to try it. Some others attempted to eat but could not do it at first. 2 days later, with no other options left, even those people chose to eat human flesh to survive.
Mouth doesn't want to open because you don't want to swallow a piece of a dead person.
On October 29th, 16 days after the crash, even this food source was running low. The survivors had no plan and did not know what to do next. That night, they heard a loud rumbling sound. A massive avalanche was rushing down the mountain. Huge amounts of snow crashed into the broken airplane, filling it completely. 8 more people died, buried and suffocated under the snow. Only 19 survivors remained alive. The remaining people were trapped in a tiny space under all the snow. Parado used a metal rod to poke a hole through the snow so that they could breathe. After working hard for 2 days, they dug a tunnel under the snow and struggled to reach the surface. As soon as they got out, they saw another snowstorm approaching. They had to get back into their snow cave to stay safe. For 3 more days,
Took the snow off my face because I had time to put my hands out. Only my hands were out.
the 19 survivors squeezed together in the cramped space. 3 days later, they climbed back to the surface and found clear weather. Once the survivors emerged and looked around, they understood a harsh truth. Rescue wasn't coming. Nobody knew where they were or that they had survived. They would have to save themselves. Staying at the wreckage and hoping for help seemed pointless. Their only chance was to take action and keep fighting until their last moment. 3 of the strongest survivors stepped forward: Canessa, Pareto, and Vizintin. The group made a difficult decision. They would give these 3 men extra food and the warmest clothing available. These men would then venture out to search for rescue.
Nothing is tougher than to die sitting there.
Their first challenge was figuring out where they were. Before the plane went down, the co-pilot had announced they had flown over Carico. Based on this information, the survivors believed they could walk just a few kilometers west and reach populated areas of Chile. This assumption proved terribly wrong. The co-pilot had been lost and confused about their actual location. The crash site sat 89 kilometers to the east, deep within the Andes mountain range. Unaware of their true situation, the 3 men rested for several days to gather strength.
It took us 3 days to climb the first mountain.
On November 15th, 33 days after the disaster, they began their journey to find help. After walking eastward for hours, they discovered the rear section of their aircraft. This piece had broken away during the initial crash. Inside, they found valuable supplies: multiple suitcases, chocolate boxes, 3 meat portions, rum, additional clothing, comic books, and medical supplies. Most importantly, they located the plane's 2-way radio system. This device could both receive and send messages. They spent the night in the tail section. The following day, instead of continuing their trek, they decided to attempt using the radio. Their plan involved retrieving batteries from the main wreckage to power the communication device. They hoped to broadcast an emergency signal. The tail section contained 24-kilogram batteries, but their weight made transport impossible. They decided to try operating the radio at that location. Roy Harley, who had some electronics knowledge, was brought in to help. Unfortunately, their plan failed.
10 days in the mountain, 25 below, it's impossible.
But their battery only provided 24-volt DC. They had no way to make the connection work. After several days of unsuccessful attempts with the radio, they accepted defeat. Their only remaining option was to head west on foot. On December 11th, 59 days after the crash, disaster struck again. An avalanche swept through their shelter, killing 3 more survivors. One survivor later described the experience. "The avalanche trapped me completely. The silence that followed was the most deadly I could imagine. I couldn't move at all." Only 16 people remained alive. To cross the western mountains, they needed protection against the brutal nights. How could they survive temperatures dropping to minus 30 degrees Celsius? Carlos Miguel Rodriguez, an 18-year-old survivor, remembered his mother's sewing lessons. He carried needles and a sewing kit in his belongings. His brilliant idea was to combine different clothing pieces into one large sleeping bag. "I thought about using insulation to create a sleeping bag," he recalled. "I didn't just have the idea, I actually made it myself." They completed this project successfully. On December 12th, exactly 2 months after the crash, the 3 brave men set out again. Pareto, Canessa, and Vizintin began climbing the glacier without any proper mountaineering equipment. The only certainty was that Chile lay to the west, one survivor explained. Going west meant climbing up and over the mountain before descending the other side. They still believed civilization was only a few kilometers away. So they packed meat for just 3 days, expecting to find help quickly. "Imagine facing this challenge without any skills or training," one survivor reflected. "You become like a child confronting a snowstorm. You try climbing straight up using both hands and feet, slipping and sliding constantly. With every step forward, you slide back halfway." Pareto prepared for the extreme cold by wearing 3 pairs of jeans, 3 sweaters over his t-shirt, and 4 pairs of socks. He even put plastic shopping bags over his socks for extra protection. The conditions were brutal. They had no technical equipment, no maps, no compass, and no climbing experience. At that altitude, the thin air made breathing difficult and oxygen scarce. Despite these overwhelming challenges, they pressed forward toward the mountain peaks. The sleeping bag they had sewn together provided crucial warmth during the freezing nights. Each day brought slow progress as the survivors moved forward step by step. One night, all 3 men squeezed into a single sleeping bag, huddling together for warmth. When morning came, they began walking again. Day after day, they pushed ahead together. By the 4th morning, a harsh reality hit them. Their calculations had been completely wrong. Looking ahead, the journey seemed endless. Food supplies were running dangerously low. Vizintin made a difficult choice. He would return to the crash site while the other 2 continued alone. This way, the remaining food could last longer for fewer people. On December 15th, Vizintin began his journey back down the mountain. The descent proved much easier than climbing up. He turned an airplane seat into a makeshift sled and reached the crash site in just 1 hour. The same distance had taken them 3 full days to climb. Pareto and Canessa continued up the mountain slope. 3 hours later, they reached the summit. What they saw crushed their spirits. Mountains stretched in every direction as far as they could see. Snow-covered peaks surrounded them completely. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't even think. What we saw was terrible. We expected to see green valleys below us. Instead, we found only mountains and snowy peaks stretching 360 degrees around us to the horizon, one survivor recalled. Pareto searched desperately for any sign of hope. Far to the west, he spotted 2 mountain peaks without snow. They decided to head in that direction. Giving up was not an option. The 2 men hiked for many more days. Eventually, they discovered a valley with a flowing river. This discovery lifted their spirits greatly. Following the river downstream would provide an easier downhill path. They walked and walked. After 9 days of trekking, on December 20th, they finally saw signs of human life. Cows grazed in distant fields. Exhaustion had taken its toll, and they could barely take another step. Across the riverbank, they spotted something amazing. 3 men on horseback appeared on the opposite bank. Pareto shouted as loud as he could, but the rushing water drowned out his voice. Fortunately, one of the horsemen noticed them and shouted back a single word: "Tomorrow." The next day, the man returned on his horse, this time carrying paper and pencils. He tied these items to a stone with string and threw them across the river. This gave Pareto his first chance to communicate with the outside world. In Spanish, Pareto wrote his desperate message: "I come from a plane that crashed in the mountains. I am from Uruguay. I've been walking for 10 days. My injured friends are still at the crash site. We need help urgently, but we don't know how to get it. We have no food. We are weak. We cannot walk any further. Please save us. Where are we?" The man who received this note was Sergio Catalan, a Chilean farmer. He read the message carefully and used gestures to show he understood. After speaking with his 2 companions, they remembered something important. Months earlier, they had heard news reports about a plane crash. The realization shocked all 3 of them. They could hardly believe that survivors from a 2-month-old crash were still alive. Sergio threw bread across the river to the starving men. Then he mounted his horse and rode west for 10 hours to reach civilization. The nearest village was still very far away. When Sergio finally reached the closest city, he immediately contacted the Army command. They quickly relayed the information to Army headquarters in Santiago. Meanwhile, other farmers helped Pareto and Canessa, bringing them on horseback to Los Matines, where they could finally rest. Their incredible journey covered 61 kilometers on foot over 10 days. The ordeal had been so severe that Canessa had lost half his body weight. By this time, he had lost so much weight that he weighed just 44 kilograms. News of their amazing survival spread quickly around the world. The story became headline news in many countries. People could hardly believe this incredible tale of human endurance. The Chilean Air Force acted fast and sent 3 helicopters to bring back the survivors. Military officials questioned both Pareto and Canessa about the exact location of the crash site. Pareto had kept the pilot's navigation chart during their journey. He had marked all the places they had walked through during their long trek. The Army took Pareto aboard one of their helicopters. His job was to help them find the wreckage site. Using Pareto's knowledge and the marked chart, the military finally located the remaining survivors. The date was December 22nd, 1972. Exactly 70 days had passed since the plane went down. 2 rescue helicopters reached the crash site and began the final rescue mission. 16 people made it out alive. Their physical condition was shocking. Many suffered altitude sickness and severe dehydration. Several had broken bones and all showed signs of serious malnutrition. Despite these challenges, every survivor made a full recovery. This incredible story teaches us about the power of hope. The old saying proves true: where there's a will, there's a way. Many people now call this disaster by a different name: the miracle of the Andes.